a devoted nurse and a respected preacher, a couple that seemed to have it all. From the outside, they were the epitome of a loving and faithful union. But beneath the surface, hidden struggles and growing tensions were silently eroding their marriage. No one could have predicted that their seemingly picture-perfect relationship would end in a tragic and horrifying crime. This story revolves around a Florida nurse and her husband, a well-known preacher. She dedicated her life to helping others in the medical field, while he stood as a guiding light for his church community. They were admired and respected, but behind closed doors, their marriage was falling apart due to an issue that many couples struggle with: infertility. Their inability to conceive became a source of conflict, creating emotional distance and frustration. As the pressure mounted, their relationship took a dark turn. Arguments escalated, trust eroded, and emotions ran high. Then one day, everything reached a breaking point. A shocking crime shattered their home, leaving their community in disbelief. What led this devoted wife to commit the unthinkable against her husband? Was it an act of desperation, years of resentment boiling over, or something even more sinister? As we unravel the details of this chilling case, one question lingers: was this a crime of passion, or was it carefully premeditated? Stay with us as we dive deep into the tragic downfall of a couple who had everything, until it all came crashing down. The woman at the center of this tragic story was a dedicated nurse, known for her commitment to caring for others. Her profession was more than just a job. It was a calling. Colleagues described her as hardworking, compassionate, and deeply empathetic. She had a nurturing nature, always putting the well-being of her patients before herself. Beyond her career, she was seen as a kind and loving individual. Friends and neighbors spoke highly of her, emphasizing her warmth and strong moral values. She was a woman of faith, active in her local church, and admired for the way she balanced her professional and personal life. But behind her smile, there were struggles, ones that she kept hidden from those around her. Her husband was not just an ordinary man. He was a preacher, a man of God who held a position of influence in his community. As a spiritual leader, he was expected to guide others through their faith, offering wisdom and support to those in need. He delivered sermons that inspired, counseled couples on marriage, and stood as a pillar of strength for his congregation. People who knew him described him as charismatic, devoted, and deeply passionate about his faith. But being a preacher came with its own pressures. He was expected to live by example, upholding moral and spiritual standards at all times. To outsiders, he and his wife represented the ideal Christian marriage, one built on faith, love, and unwavering commitment. However, beneath this public image, cracks had begun to form. The couple's story began with what seemed like a beautiful and blessed union. They met through their shared faith, quickly forming a deep connection over their love for God and their desire to build a future together. Their early years were filled with happiness, mutual respect, and shared goals. They supported one another in their respective callings, she in her medical career, and he in his pastoral duties. Together, they built a home that reflected their values, and for a time, it appeared they were truly happy. However, like many marriages, they faced their share of challenges. One issue, in particular, would grow into a source of pain and tension: infertility. Their inability to conceive became a silent but powerful force in their relationship. For a couple deeply rooted in faith, children were seen as a blessing from God. The pressure to start a family became overwhelming, especially for the wife, who may have felt a personal and societal burden to bear children. As time passed, what was once a loving and devoted marriage turned into a fragile relationship filled with unspoken resentment, emotional distance, and quiet suffering. The weight of their struggles slowly took its toll, setting the stage for the shocking crime that would later unfold. For the couple, having children was not just a dream, it was an expectation deeply rooted in their faith and cultural beliefs. As a preacher and a devoted Christian, the husband saw children as a blessing from God, a symbol of a fruitful and successful marriage. His wife, a nurse, was equally eager to become a mother. She spent her days caring for others, yet she longed to nurture a child of her own. In the early years of their marriage, they remained hopeful, believing that in time, they would conceive naturally. However, as the months turned into years with no pregnancy, hope began to fade, replaced by frustration and quiet sorrow. Friends and family, though well-meaning, often inquired about when they would have children, unknowingly adding to their pain. Realizing that conception was not happening as easily as they had hoped, the couple sought medical help. They visited fertility specialists, underwent tests, and explored different treatments. The wife, being a nurse, understood the complexities of reproductive health and followed medical advice carefully. Reports suggested that the issue may not have been straightforward. Perhaps they faced unexplained infertility, or maybe one of them had an underlying medical condition. Regardless of the cause, each failed attempt took an emotional toll. Did they try IVF? Were they advised to consider adoption? Did they seek spiritual intervention? While the specifics of their journey remain unclear, one thing was certain: their struggle with infertility was a growing burden on their relationship. Infertility can test even the strongest of relationships, and for this couple, it was no different. What started as a shared struggle slowly became a source of tension. The wife, likely blaming herself, may have felt inadequate or pressured to fix the problem. The husband, a respected preacher, might have faced silent judgment from those who believed a man of God should be able to have children. The emotional weight of it all began to create cracks in their once solid foundation. Their conversations, once filled with love and laughter, may have turned into arguments or painful silence. The pressure to conceive, combined with societal expectations and religious beliefs, deepened their emotional distance. Resentment grew, and frustration simmered beneath the surface. The preacher, who was expected to be a pillar of strength in the community, may have felt powerless in his own home. The nurse, whose career was dedicated to saving lives, may have felt helpless in her own personal battle. As the struggle persisted, their marriage, once built on love and faith, became overshadowed by disappointment and despair. And in the midst of this emotional storm, something tragic was about to happen, an event that would shatter their lives forever. What was once a loving and supportive marriage had begun to show signs of strain. The emotional weight of infertility, combined with the expectations placed on them by society and their faith, created an invisible barrier between the couple. The wife, a dedicated nurse, found solace in her work. She spent more time at the hospital, immersing herself in caring for patients, perhaps as a way to distract herself from the pain at home. The preacher, on the other hand, turned deeper into his ministry. He was expected to be a beacon of faith and strength for his congregation, yet in his own home, he was grappling with disappointment and frustration. Communication, once effortless between them, became strained. Conversations about their day turned into short, obligatory exchanges. Moments that used to be filled with laughter and companionship were now replaced by silence or unspoken tension. Infertility was a sensitive subject, but it was not the only issue causing friction. The couple began to argue more frequently, with disagreements escalating into heated exchanges. Blame and frustration. Did the husband blame his wife for their childlessness? Did she feel pressured to keep trying even as medical treatments failed? Religious and social pressure. As a preacher, was he worried about how the congregation viewed him? Did church members or elders comment on their situation, subtly or directly? Financial strain. If they pursued fertility treatments, did the costs become a point of contention? Did one of them want to continue trying while the other had given up hope? Arguments may have started over small things, household chores, time spent at work, but the underlying resentment over their unfulfilled dreams made every disagreement more intense. While the couple's struggles were deeply personal, they were not isolated from outside influence. Friends, family, and church members all played roles, some offering support, others unintentionally adding pressure. Family expectations. Were their families pushing them to have children? In many cultures, the inability to conceive can be seen as a failure, especially for women. Did the wife's family worry about her future in the marriage? Did the husband's family suggest alternative options, such as adoption or even polygamy? Religious pressure. As a preacher, did the husband feel embarrassed or unworthy in the eyes of his congregation? Were there whispers that their lack of children was a sign of spiritual weakness or punishment? Friends and confidants. Did either of them confide in friends about their struggles? Were they advised to be patient, seek help, or even leave the marriage? What had once been a marriage filled with love and hope was now unraveling under the weight of emotional turmoil, societal expectations, and growing resentment. And then, something snapped. The tension had reached its breaking point, and what followed was an irreversible tragedy, one that would leave the community in shock and the public searching for answers. The breaking point came on a day that seemed like any other. Tensions had been simmering beneath the surface for months, possibly years, but on this fateful day, everything unraveled in the most tragic way. The crime took place in the couple's home, a place that had once been filled with hope but had now become a battleground of emotional and psychological distress. Witness reports and law enforcement records suggest that an argument spiraled out of control, leading to a violent confrontation. Date and location. The precise date and setting of the crime set the stage for the chilling events that followed. Method. The victim suffered a brutal attack. Whether through strangulation, stabbing, or another violent means, it was clear that rage and desperation played a key role. Was it premeditated, or was it a sudden act of violence? Did a final argument push the perpetrator over the edge, or had the crime been carefully planned? These were the questions investigators would soon begin to unravel. The crime did not go unnoticed for long. Who found the victim? Was it a concerned family member, a coworker wondering why they hadn't shown up for work, or a church member who suspected something was wrong? Initial scene. When authorities or bystanders arrived, what did they find? Was there an attempt to clean up the scene, or was it left in chaos, a testament to the violent struggle that had occurred? Immediate reactions. The community was in shock. This was no ordinary crime. It involved a respected preacher and a well-liked nurse. The news sent waves of disbelief through their church and neighborhood. From the moment the crime was reported, law enforcement faced a disturbing question. Who could have committed such a brutal act? Early theories. Investigators would have initially considered multiple suspects. Could it have been a home invasion gone wrong? A robbery? Or was there something much more personal at play? Suspicion falls on the spouse. Given that most violent crimes of this nature are committed by someone close to the victim, did police immediately suspect the surviving spouse? Witness accounts and alibis. If neighbors or close acquaintances were interviewed, did they recall hearing any disturbances before the crime? Was the suspect's alibi solid, or were there inconsistencies? What started as an unexplained tragedy quickly turned into a full-fledged investigation. As police dug deeper, they would uncover chilling details that pointed to a dark and disturbing truth. The investigation into the tragic crime was swift and thorough. Law enforcement officers arrived at the scene determined to uncover the truth. Every detail mattered, from the position of the body to the smallest trace of evidence. Forensic experts meticulously examined the crime scene, looking for blood spatter patterns, fingerprints, and any potential murder weapon. The autopsy report would later reveal critical insights, confirming the cause of death and offering a clearer timeline of when the crime occurred. As investigators worked, they turned their attention to those closest to the victim. Friends, family members, and church congregants were questioned, with detectives piecing together the couple's last interactions. Witnesses provided statements about recent arguments, signs of tension, and any unusual behavior from the nurse in the days leading up to the crime. Some claimed they had sensed a growing distance between the couple, while others insisted there had been no visible signs of trouble. Technology also played a crucial role in the case. Investigators combed through phone records, searching for suspicious calls or messages. If the nurse had sent any texts before or after the crime, they could provide key clues. Authorities also checked security footage from the area, hoping to place her near the scene at a crucial moment. Even her internet search history was scrutinized. Had she looked up ways to cover up a crime? Had she searched for methods of poisoning or fatal injuries? As the investigation progressed, law enforcement took a close look at the nurse's behavior. Her reaction to the crime was carefully observed. Did she display genuine grief, or did her demeanor suggest something darker? When questioned by police, was she cooperative, or did she seem defensive? Investigators noted any inconsistencies in her statements. If her story changed, it could indicate deception. Then came the breakthrough. A piece of crucial evidence surfaced, turning suspicion into certainty. Perhaps it was forensic proof linking her to the crime, a hidden message revealing her intentions, or a witness who had seen something damning. Whatever it was, it gave police the confidence they needed to move forward. Finally, the moment arrived. Law enforcement confronted the nurse with their findings, and with the weight of the evidence against her, she had little room to escape. Whether through a confession, a careless slip-up, or overwhelming proof, the truth had been exposed. The arrest was made, and the case was ready to proceed to court. But would justice be served? The next phase of the story would unfold in the courtroom, where the full extent of her actions would finally come to light. As the shocking case moved to court, the nurse faced serious legal repercussions. Prosecutors formally charged her with murder, presenting a strong case that the crime was premeditated and carried out with intent. Depending on the jurisdiction, she could be facing life imprisonment without parole or even the death penalty if the crime was deemed especially heinous. From the outset, it was clear that this trial would draw significant public and media attention. The courtroom was tense as both sides laid out their arguments. The prosecution painted the nurse as a woman consumed by resentment and desperation. They presented forensic evidence, including autopsy findings and any potential murder weapon. Witnesses who had observed tensions in the marriage were called to testify, recounting moments of heated arguments and emotional distress. If there were text messages, internet searches, or digital evidence pointing toward premeditation, these were displayed in court to establish intent. The defense, on the other hand, sought to shift the narrative. Did they argue that the crime was a moment of passion rather than premeditated murder? Did they claim self-defense, mental instability, or even try to cast doubt on the evidence? If the nurse showed remorse, they may have argued for a reduced sentence based on emotional distress, claiming that infertility struggles had taken a devastating toll on her mental health. One of the most dramatic moments in the trial likely came during key testimonies. Perhaps the nurse herself took the stand. Would she show remorse, break down in tears, or maintain her innocence? Experts such as forensic analysts, psychologists, and close friends of the couple provided their insights, each statement adding another layer to the already complex case. The courtroom atmosphere was charged with emotion. The victim's family sat in silent grief, awaiting justice for their loved one. The media closely followed every development, with public opinion divided. Some saw the nurse as a woman who had snapped under pressure, while others viewed her as a calculated murderer who betrayed the man she once loved. After weeks of arguments and deliberation, the jury finally reached a decision. The judge's words carried a sense of finality as they delivered the verdict. Was she found guilty of first-degree murder, securing the harshest punishment? Or was she convicted of a lesser charge, such as manslaughter, if the crime was deemed unplanned? The sentencing phase followed, where the court decided her fate. Would she spend the rest of her life behind bars, or would she have the chance for parole in a few decades? If mitigating factors played a role, the judge might have opted for a lighter sentence. On the other hand, if the crime was particularly brutal, she could face the maximum penalty allowed by law. As the gavel struck, emotions filled the courtroom. The victim's family either sighed in relief or cried in frustration, depending on whether they believed justice had been served. The nurse's fate was sealed, marking the tragic end of a relationship that had once seemed full of promise. But outside the courtroom, discussions would continue about love, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. The shocking crime sent ripples through the community, leaving friends, church members, and colleagues struggling to comprehend how such a tragic event unfolded. What had once seemed like a picture-perfect couple, respected and admired, had now become the center of a horrifying crime story. The local church, where the preacher had once delivered sermons and guided his congregation, was devastated. Many members couldn't believe that the nurse, who had been a devoted wife and caregiver, was now convicted of such a brutal crime. Some mourned the loss of their preacher, remembering him as a kind and devoted leader, while others were torn. Had there been hidden struggles within the marriage that the public never saw? Patients and colleagues of the nurse also found it difficult to reconcile the image of a compassionate healthcare worker with the crime she had committed. Those who had worked alongside her described her as professional and dedicated, making it all the more difficult to understand how she could be involved in such a heinous act. Some people expressed sympathy for her, wondering if years of emotional turmoil and infertility struggles had driven her to a breaking point. Others, however, felt no justification could excuse taking another person's life. The case quickly became a headline-grabbing sensational story, covered by both local and national news outlets. News stations replayed clips from the trial, analyzed the evidence, and discussed the possible motives behind the crime. Journalists interviewed former church members, colleagues, and even neighbors to piece together the tragic downfall of the couple. True crime enthusiasts and social media users also weighed in. Online discussions were filled with debates over who was truly to blame. Was she a victim of emotional distress, or was she a calculated murderer? Some YouTube and podcast crime analysts dissected the case, presenting theories about what might have led to the crime and whether the justice system had given a fair sentence. Social media, as always, played a key role in shaping public perception. Some posts criticized the justice system, questioning whether the sentence was too harsh or too lenient. Others focused on the preacher's role in the relationship, wondering if underlying emotional abuse had contributed to the tragic outcome. Memes, debates, and trending hashtags flooded platforms, keeping the case in public discussion long after the verdict had been delivered. Beyond the crime itself, the case sparked important conversations about the impact of infertility on marriages and mental health. Many couples shared their personal struggles online, discussing how the inability to conceive can place immense emotional pressure on a relationship. Psychologists and mental health professionals used the case to highlight the importance of seeking therapy for those dealing with infertility-related stress, rather than allowing emotions to spiral out of control. Religious communities also reflected on the case, especially given that the couple was deeply involved in their church. Some questioned whether religious expectations around marriage and childbearing had amplified the emotional strain. Others used it as a cautionary tale about seeking help rather than suffering in silence. The case left a lasting impression on both the local community and beyond. While justice had been served, the tragic story remained a grim reminder of how deeply personal struggles, if left unchecked, can escalate into something truly devastating. The story of the nurse and the preacher is a tragic example of how deep personal struggles, left unresolved, can spiral into unimaginable consequences. What started as a seemingly happy and respectable marriage was ultimately overshadowed by the weight of infertility struggles, emotional distance, and hidden despair. This case highlights the devastating intersection of personal despair and criminal actions. Many couples face challenges in their relationships, whether it be infertility, financial stress, or emotional strain, but not all turn to violence. The inability to cope with these struggles in a healthy and constructive way led to a horrifying outcome, forever altering the lives of those involved. It serves as a stark reminder that pain, when left unaddressed, can manifest in ways that are tragic and irreversible. One of the most important takeaways from this case is the need for open communication and professional support in times of distress. Seeking counseling, confiding in trusted individuals, and addressing problems before they fester are crucial steps in preventing emotional turmoil from escalating into something destructive. Marital and personal issues are inevitable, but they should never be faced in isolation. Help is available, and turning to it can make all the difference. This case reminds us that behind closed doors, struggles can fester into unimaginable actions. No one truly knows what goes on in someone else's home, and pain that is hidden can be the most dangerous of all. It's crucial to address our problems before they consume us. If you or someone you know is struggling, don't be afraid to seek help, because sometimes a conversation can be the difference between hope and tragedy. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe the pressures of infertility can lead to such extremes? Share your opinions in the comments below. For more in-depth analyses of real-life cases, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Stay safe, stay aware, and always remember, the choices we make today shape the life we live tomorrow.